Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another episode of the Real Podcast. I'm your host, David Moya. Today we have a unique story to share, a unique individual that's going to come on the show here and tell you about her story. I wanted to have Nancy Schrimpf of Pacific Sotheby's International Realty come on the show today and talk about how she has been able to close a multi-million-dollar listing during COVID-19. So Nancy, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, David. It's a pleasure to be able to talk about this experience because it was a once-in-a-lifetime situation.
The way you maneuvered and you navigated through this time it's been super inspiring. So one, first of all, you are a great agent to work with. So anybody who's watching or listening, if you're an agent, if you're a vendor, if you're anything within this industry and a homeowner, home seller, Nancy is a great person. She has a great heart and she works very hard. And I've seen this and I follow you on social media, so I see constantly what you're doing. If you're listening, watching, and you're thinking about connecting with Nancy, definitely connect with Nancy. Just watching you do this has been amazing. I want you to just share your story, because I think a lot of times we can become very fearful during a time of uncertainty, and instead of pulling back, you really just went for it. And a lot of people might be a little scared to take on such a task, because this property that I'm talking about specifically, it's an architecturally significant home. It's well beyond multi-million-dollar transaction. When you and I were talking, we met before the pandemic. We were working on a few things, and then you mentioned we had booked the shoot for this property. So you were already working on this, but when we filmed, because you booked a month out, when we filmed, that's when everything hit, and so you had to adjust. So kind of walk me through that process, at least just the beginning, and then we can kind of go into how what we filmed and what you did and how you marketed it.
Okay. I think it's really important to underscore that it wasn't just a pandemic. It was also, we had the fish die off in the lagoon, which, we had some obstacles. This is a beautiful home, and I was incredibly proud to represent it, but it was very taste specific. So I knew I needed to get it out there at a time when nobody was out there. So of course, that media, that's the only alternative. And you just have to dive in. You can't be afraid. You can't go halfway. And I'm so grateful for you and your team, because again and again, people told me that they were so inspired to come see the property based on what you had done. We had 10 extraordinarily well-qualified buyers come through who had already seen it enough to know that they were quite serious about it at a time when the world was locked down. 8 weeks, we got it sold despite COVID, despite a really smelly lagoon right there in front of the house, and a few other things that were unique to the property and somewhat obstacles. But I'm 100% certain that it was because I was, happy, honored, grateful to be able to hire some of the best to represent the home, not just with fantastic pictures and amazing video, but Matterport. And I think it's so important that agents be willing to do all three. Too often I hear people say, well, which do you think is more effective, this or that? It's all of it. You have to do all of it, because people see things differently. An engineer is going to want Matterport. Somebody who's more poetic is going to want one of your beautiful videos that captures the vibe more than the facts. So I'm so thankful that you were able to provide everything I needed.
I'm not trying to make this a testimonial, though. I thought all the positive feedback, but I do just want to, okay, so you had a hurdle. Your first hurdle to jump over was, hey, we're in this pandemic, and then, which we'll jump into right now. But second, the red tide and killing off of all the fish in the lagoon, and that it was a stench, because I live on the other side of the lagoon, and you could just smell it. And driving through the 101 for about a week or two, right? Or maybe even more. It was pretty
longer. It was longer. It was 2 or 3 weeks. It smelled very, very, very bad. Yeah.
And so how did you get around that? Did you just say, hey, look, if you're coming to the house, or maybe the mask worked in your favor, right?
I don't think we were doing masks just yet then. I don't think that. I think at the very beginning we weren't doing those, so we were saving those for the doctors and things. But yeah, eventually they probably did help. It was, it was a lot about presenting the home, having the actual showing be more the end of the process instead of the beginning of the process. For so long, we've just cycled people through houses, and that's how we've done it. We can't do it that way anymore. Certainly not until there's a vaccine, and maybe never. Maybe that's not the best way to be doing things. Maybe the best way to do things for our buyers and sellers is being in the home the end of the process. I've already seen the floor plans. I've already looked at all the pictures. I've already experienced the video. I've already walked off the Matterport. Yes, this is the home for me. And think of how much easier that will make it for our sellers. So I think that's a really important takeaway from all this, is to be willing to do things differently. And that's certainly how we approached it. We approached it that you will come in this house after you're almost sure this is the right house for you.
Get only very serious buyers through the doors, because really everybody, you're trying to take everybody's health in consideration, the seller, the potential buyer, you, obviously, anybody else coming through the property. So in a way, maybe this helped to kind of lean out the process, in the sense of like, the non-serious buyers are not going to take the time to go do all that. Whereas if you have an open house, maybe you have like 40 people come through, but none of them are really going to be serious buyers. They're tracking in all potential, what have you.
Right.
And so moving forward, maybe we could talk about this towards the end, but are you hinting that maybe this is a much better process because you're vetting the people that come in the process into the home?
I think for luxury homes, I think it's appropriate. In the past, I would not have insisted that somebody prove to me that they were an actual buyer as opposed to an aspirational buyer. You don't want to offend people. You want to tread carefully with that. But under the circumstances, I was requiring people show me that they could actually afford this home. And I think in hindsight, I will do that for most luxury homes, certainly ones that are in the multi-millions like this one.
Nice.
It seems like they're the right thing to do for everybody's sake. Why have somebody come through the house if they it's just going to break their heart because there's no way they can afford it. So
you're listing the property, the pandemic happens, and you're still having to move forward. So what was your thought process? Instead of freaking out, you're like, okay, how do I go through this? How do I maneuver through this? And what did you do?
Pivot. You have to be willing to pivot. You have to say, this is how things are now. So what should I do about that? And we did that, and we worked through it. And of course, there was a lot of pivoting, because at that time there was every other day there was a new PEAD. You have to sign this, and you have to fill this out, and you have to be in charge of that. And I think being willing to be fluid, and also I have a phrase I love that I learned from our mutual friend Dana Whitaker, which is, in a transaction, it's important to be the thermometer, not the furnace. So I kept reminding myself that, as stressful as this was for me, because it really was pretty stressful for me, that the most important thing was keep in mind how stressful it must be for my sellers and potential buyers, and to do things that would make it easier for everybody else. And that ultimately worked quite well in this transaction.
You did video, you did Matterport, you did photo. So if someone is going through, they have a listing like this, and say an agent's listening or watching, you're encouraging all three, because you're really trying to, cater to all types of minds, like more of a right brain, left brain type person. How did you utilize those assets in your marketing, and in any other form of marketing, that you feel like really was essential during this time?
Those were good questions. I always, for all my clients, even the much lower priced homes, I always have a dedicated website created. And then all the print media, anything you're doing, you point them to the website, and it's all right there for them. So I think that that's a really important part of the process. I want to say too, this isn't just for listing agents, because I spent this past weekend with some buyers, and they're, at the $2+ million price point. And we did the exact reverse of what I did for my sellers. I got together all the media that I could. We went through everything. They're out of area. They're from Seattle. And so we did a lot of stuff online. By the time they came down, We had it narrowed down to 2 properties. We are actually in escrow on one of them now. So I know it's been a good month. I think that I never would have taken buyers to only see 2 homes in the past. We certainly would have spent the whole weekend looking at homes, but now we're doing so much more media and online things so that we don't have to. And it's been a very positive experience. I think for my buyers are certainly very, very happy with their choice.
Moving forward, is this something that you see the industry could potentially take on as more of the norm? Sending media really, because more and more people are doing video, more and more agents are doing more video, and Matterport photo obviously has been around for years and years, but Matterport and video are kind of the way we're trying to communicate the feeling, the essence of a home. Does it help you save time? Does it help you just be more efficient with the buyer, with the seller, because you're basically sending them, let's say you found one property that you think fits their criteria, you're sending them pictures, video, Matterport, and you're saying, hey, this is this home, take a look. And then they're probably watching it on their own time. They don't have to schedule something with you necessarily. So it almost appears more efficient.
Definitely. I think this is one of those things where we're going to go, isn't it interesting that we didn't think to do it this way sooner? Mm-hmm. Because it seems like it meets our clients' needs so much more. You know, my favorite time used to be to have the clients in the car with me because I would get to know them. But I think that we can bridge that gap with things like personal little bio videos and things like that. We need to do other things to connect for the lost face-to-face time that we're not going to have when we go show somebody 12 houses over 3 days and are in the car all day together. So it is a better way, but it's going to require a little bit of tweaking to get it just right.
The process, you've made a pivot. You said, I need to really double down on these video assets or these, Matterport, however, to market, to share, to have, available for other agents who are looking for a perfect home like this. I love your story because you are very invested in your home sellers' lives. Like, we were there, you guys are friends. It was just like, your interest wasn't just selling the home. It was about having a role in their new stage in life where they're selling their home and they're buying something else. And you took on that role. So I think that's first and foremost, in my opinion, the most important thing. Like, I feel like you as a person took that on and you cared. I don't want to confuse people and think, hey, as long as you do video, Matterport, and photo, you're going to get the home sold. I think there's deeper layers to that. And obviously it helps, like you're saying, but first and foremost, your care and your attention to their needs is huge. And obviously the respect and the trust you created with you and your client. All right. So just want to make that clear. I mean, obviously that goes without saying. If someone knows you, they know. Yeah, of course, Nancy's like that. But just for people who are watching, listening, like, you have to care about people. You have to do the things that you need to do to be successful in the business. And what takes you, I think, to the next level, allows you to close more deals, is having the right tools, the right support. And that's what we're talking about with video, Matterport, and photo. So just clearing that up. When you made the pivot and you went into really marketing the property in a unique way due to the circumstance, what did you encounter more challenges along the way, and how did you navigate that?
Just endurance and being willing to learn. I certainly got a good deal of support from Pacific Sotheby's International Realty. I was very grateful for that. I made some phone calls to our marketing department, asked for some guidance, because I couldn't do a lot of the international marketing I was planning on doing. I mean, I could, but nobody from international places could come in. So that was a huge part of my original marketing plan, was international, and I had to swap that all out because I needed to really find a local buyer, and ultimately did find a local buyer. That was different than what I expected, and I was grateful for the resources. And there were some issues about what's the best way to advertise. Back in the early beginning of this, we were thought that, like, you shouldn't be touching anything. So should you be in, Dream Homes magazine? Are people going to be throwing those straight in the trash? So there was a lot of that kind of thinking things through. But again, it's just about thinking them through, and and having a good support team that can give you advice. And sometimes trying things that didn't work and then trying something else that did.
Was it like, okay, this is perfect because of certain criteria, it matched perfectly? At what point did you feel like, okay, this is the right match?
Relatively quickly. Relatively quickly.
You said 8 weeks you guys sold it.
Yeah.
Wow, that's beautiful. Take me through like how that felt for you. So, presenting that to your sellers, and then what did they say? How did they feel? What was the environment at that point?
Well, we were all pleasantly surprised because I had braced them for the fact that this could take a year. This is a very different type of home. These are very different types of circumstances. And we were not fire sale priced, nor did we intend to drop to a fire sale price. So we were all ready for it to take as long as it was going to take. And I'm very, very thankful that we were able to cast such a broad net that we could bring in that many people, and one of them was the right buyer.
You talked about it being a local individual, right, who purchased the property, and you said you said you were kind of surprised by that, or was that something you were thinking of, it was to be an international buyer?
I initially expected it to be an international buyer. I certainly had a good portion of the marketing plan was based on international spots where we could bring somebody like that in, but of course the airports were closed, so no international buyers were coming. So we had to find somebody locally, and that's exactly what we did.
You could have given up, right, at some point, because it's like, man, I can't go here because, nobody's, let's say nobody's touching books. So if we're on the Dream Magazine, who's going to pick it up? No international buyers are coming because no one's flying in. People want to feel, like they're at the property. So many obstacles you could have, really just gotten stuck on and not persevered, not pushed through.
And also another part of my marketing plan was to get a flyer in every Sotheby's office in the world. And that was, weren't even doing flyers then. You weren't even, because again, the no touching stuff. So no, there were a lot of obstacles. There was a moment where I said to because this is the right thing to do. There's a moment where I said to my sellers, do you want to pull back? Is this still the right time? And they said, if you think you can do it, it's still the right time. And I said, well, then I'll do it. So we did it. It all came together.
That's beautiful. I feel like that's such a beautiful story. Our team adored your clients as well. Everybody was so awesome. And that's another thing too. Like a lot of people don't know the importance of having great clients on your end as well, because that helps the process. That helps us, be able to support you in a different way, in a unique way than if we didn't have the right welcome or like the right support right from them. So they were phenomenal. Just in closing, I know I just wanted to have you kind of talk about and be an inspiration for those who are watching, whether it's someone thinking about selling their property or someone who's thinking of buying, or even an agent, right? Like how you were actually able to, I think it's a little bit more challenging to sell that type of property, right? Because it's very specific, it's unique in a regular market. But now you're in a pandemic and you have less access to certain things, and you were able to do it kind of in rather record time. So congratulations to that, to you on that. Well deserved. If you're watching and listening, like this is a great inspiration, or should be a great inspiration for you. I actually drove by and I saw your sign. And I was like, what? I have to call Nancy. And I think I called you or texted you, and you're like, you're like, yeah. And I was like, oh my goodness. Like, I love seeing people win, especially people like you, people who trusted us, who we're rooting for each other. It's not like, it's, you count us on our team, a part of your team. So we love rooting for you. And I love hearing that you have a buyer that's in escrow too. So congratulations to you. So just any final words you'd like to say, for somebody who's listening or watching?
Yeah, I think it's important that we remember that two things. It's not a recipe, right? It's not if I do this and this and this, it will happen. But there are recipe components. There are things you have to do for every client. And the way the market is right now, media is the thing you have to do for every client. And when I see online people who have taken their own pictures with their phones, it breaks my heart, because we're better than that. So I think it's really important to remember to do the best we can for our clients, and also to, like you say, to have a heart, because things change, things are hard, things are complicated, but if we're working together, if we're looking out for each other's needs, and if we're doing our best, it's going to be fine. And it certainly was in this case.
Well, Nancy, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate you sharing your story and your time. And I know for sure you're an inspiration for a lot of us right now, especially during this market, during this time, during the pandemic. So, pivoting, adapting, taking each case as a unique opportunity to think outside the box. So thank you so much, Nancy, and hope to have you back on another success story.
Thanks, David. I look forward to it.
All right. And if you're watching or listening, let's connect with Nancy. Nancy, what's the best way for somebody who's interested in finding out more information about you?
I'm always open for phone calls, texts, emails, 760-717-2307. Nancy Schrimpf is also a website, www.nancyschrimpf.com. So feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to help you any way I can.
Yeah, and just spell your last name.
Yeah. NancySchrimpf.com. Go figure. I know. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Nancy. Have a great day, and keep me posted on everything.
Sounds good.
All right. Take care. I actually drove by and I saw your sign, and I was like, "What? I have to call Nancy." And I think I called you or texted you, and you're like, you're like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Oh my goodness!" Like, I love seeing people win, especially people like you. People who have trusted us, who we're rooting for each other. It's not like it's you count us on our team a part of your team. So we love rooting for you, and I love hearing that you have a buyer that's in escrow too. So congratulations to you.
Thank you.
So just any final words you'd like to say for somebody who's listening or watching?
Yeah, I think it's important that we remember that two things. It's not a recipe, right? It's not if I do this and this and this, it will happen. But there are recipe components. There are things you have to do for every client. And the way the market is right now, media is the thing you have to do for every client. And when I see online people who have taken their own pictures with their phones, it breaks my heart because we're better than that. So I think it's really important to remember to do the best we can for our clients, and also to, like you say, to have a heart, because things change, things are hard, things are complicated, but if we're working together, if we're looking out for each other's needs, and if we're doing our best, it's going to be fine. And it certainly was in this case.
Well, Nancy, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate you sharing your story and your time. And I know for sure you're an inspiration for a lot of us right now, especially during this market, during this time, during the pandemic. Pivoting, adapting, taking each case as a unique opportunity to think outside the box. So thank you so much, Nancy, and hope to have you back on another success story.
Thanks, David. I look forward to it.
All right. And if you're watching or listening, let's connect with Nancy. Nancy, what's the best way for somebody who's interested in finding out more information about you?
I'm always open for phone calls, texts, emails, 760-717-2307. Nancy Schrimpf is also a website, www.nancyschrimpf.com. So feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to help you any way I can. NancySchrimpf.com. Go figure. I know. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Nancy. Have a great day, and keep me posted on everything.
Sounds good.
All right. Take care.